So just wanted to say a few things before we start the discussion. This is totally an introductory series of lectures for smart contracts. Those of you that are experienced in programming probably have noticed that there is a lot of back and forth. It has to do with how you set up your development environment, but also there are massively more complicated stuff you can do. But unfortunately, we cannot. I mean, we only had half a day essentially to contain this in. So we can discuss whatever questions you might have, and then I'll try and walk you through one or two examples. One is already written, so I'll give you the link, and you can also try it when you have a lot more time, because you're going to need about 2 hours if everything goes according to plan. So any questions, please? And thank you also for joining as well. Question by Ben on, do we pay gas for IPFS? No, you don't pay gas for IPFS. And actually IPFS is not connected with Ethereum. So you can use IPFS with any other type of blockchain. So you could combine it with anything else. Along with Swarm, IPFS is one of the, let's say, decentralized storage networks that you can use to store large files. And any kind of application of content in the blockchain, you know, for our purposes, for example, we use it to store BIM files, which are sometimes incredibly heavy. And you can also customize IPFS to fit your own environment.
Hi Theo, it's Dennis here from UCL.
Hi Dennis,
Hello.
Nice to see you again.
Yeah, you too. How many locations is our IPFS data stored? So it's not, I'm guessing it's not stored in just in one place, because if I have a document stored in my computer with IPFS and my computer's offline, how can other people access that document?
Well, there are incentivization mechanisms in the same way that nodes are incentivized on the Ethereum blockchain to participate in mine. You can incentivize people to essentially copy your content. And one of the ways to do that is by also allowing them to use your own storage. So it works in a kind of peer-to-peer manner. The closest one I can think of, which is really a very, maybe it shows how old I am, is the Napster network of sharing MP3 files, you know, 20, 25 years ago. So what happens is the moment you go or you upload a file, it starts to propagate along your peers. There is no guarantee that you will have the document copied unless you incentivize everyone to copy it. Mechanisms for that have appeared on the Ethereum blockchain, and these are called, the most known one is called Filecoin, which is a series of scripts that are essentially pay people to propagate your content. And from that point of view, you can essentially kind of guarantee availability. Was that good enough? Did it kind of answer what you wanted to find out?
Yes, yeah. So the incentive to store data is because you get paid in Filecoin.
Yeah. So they have created a token which is called Filecoin, and you get paid using that.
We have a question from Sagar in the chat. How can BIM models be updated automatically and recorded in blockchain using smart contracts?
There are many solutions for that. I can talk about the solutions we have developed. The way to do that is you need a close integration between BIM software, storage mechanisms such as IPFS, and blockchains such as Ethereum. And the way to do it is you essentially need plugins, and I'll show one of them right now, continuing from here, on where the execution of the plugin, the execution of the script uploads the file onto IPFS, but also records the changes. As we saw, I did it manually in the video, records the changes in a hash, and that hash then gets recorded on the blockchain, and that record is what is the permanent change, essentially. The other question you have, whether Cloud BIM includes blockchain, or is it just simply a cloud infrastructure? Yes, you can interface between Cloud BIM and blockchain, but at least my position would be that it would be fantastic if we can move on to totally decentralized infrastructures, and at least the research we're trying to conduct is essentially part of it is to create tools that will allow totally decentralized infrastructures, because Cloud BIM is essentially controlled by specific companies. So from that point of view, there are barriers to interoperability.
Hi, I'm Francesco Spegni from UniVPM.
Hello.
I saw that you can filter operations based on the sender of the transaction, let's say.
Yes.
So you can allow or disallow some transaction based on the caller
Yes.
profile. Can you do the same with a group, like based on group membership? Like you allow a transaction to a group of people without knowing their identities upfront.
A little bit complicated question. The way I would do that is by splitting the function into two contracts. So one contract would handle a group of addresses, and then I would map those addresses to specific numbers, and then I would allow those numbers to call functions on the contract. So you would do it through a mapping, but you would need a second contract to guarantee anonymity, essentially. Does that make sense? You don't have an inbuilt way to create groups of addresses without first recording this in a contract. Any other questions?
Then you have to limit the first contract to be called only to the members of the second contract.
Yes.
And not by any actor in the network.
Yes. So the idea would be that you would connect it with specific addresses that can call the second contract rather than have it publicly available. Correct. Obviously, I mean, everything we're discussing here has to do with a completely public blockchain. So this is, you can think of various other solutions to situations like this if you use, for example, a permissioned blockchain where participation in the chain has to happen essentially before by giving you permission. But that might break anonymization.
Hi there.
Thank you.
Hello.
Actually, I would like to ask you, like, how these IoT devices can interact with smart contracts. Suppose I'm working on a construction project and there is a crane operation going on. So in case of any accident on site or any, if the crane is almost on the verge happening the accident, so is there any process like I can get some alert messages or KPI reports using smart contracts?
Yes. That is possible, but it depends also on the the way to do it depends on the blockchain you're using. Let me ask you a couple of more questions. Are you thinking of running the blockchain directly on the IoT network?
Actually, yes, on this line, I just read one case study by Costain, and they installed crane operation in a running project cycle, and they set up this alert kind of report where they mention some trigger points in smart contracts. So as soon as the IoT devices will capture the signals from crane, these devices will be fitted on crane. So as soon as some triggers will be, there should be some thresholds will be crossed, some triggers will be happen in the smart contract, and the smart contract will automatically send messages and alerts to project managers and crane operators on site. So instead of like informing by walkie-talkie after the accident happens, it gives a proactive action.
From the point of view of coding this, I would say it would be pretty simple to do so. There have been examples of people doing so with Hyperledger, for example, which is it's a little bit more difficult to set up. You can set it up using I'm going to describe two cases. One case is the IoT network themselves is the blockchain, so they're running a blockchain, and on that you're running smart contracts, and that would be a private blockchain that is developed just for that construction site. One way to easily prototype this is if you get, say, Raspberry Pis. You could get a very cheap Raspberry Pis and then run an Ethereum blockchain directly on a network of those, along with sensors that directly speak to the blockchain, and then essentially write a smart contract that would action certain triggers after receiving a signal from a sensor. The difficulty would be to establish always what happens outside of the blockchain, whether it is an accident or not, right? So there you would need some kind of...
So for that reason, we can define the thresholds in the smart contracts, and it will get triggered once it is crossed on site.
Yes.
One more approach I read somewhere, it's a DFMA approach, like Design for Manufacturing and Assembly. Yeah, it's by Lang Orke in UK, and they implement it on a steel beam manufacturing. So if a steel beam is procured by some and prepared some raw materials, the data will be fed in smart contracts and blockchain. And even if it is installed and after 10 years some accident happened, any third party can track its manufacturing and the supplier and all the root causes of accident. So my question is how you are like actually coding these signals from IoT devices into smart contracts. Because for running smart contracts, I need not to click on some command button. I need automatic actions. So is there any way to capture these signals from IoT devices into smart contracts?
When you say signals, it depends on what those are.
Like sensors on site, like IoT sensors.
No, I understand. Give me a second. I understand IoT sensors, but an IoT sensor could send, for example, a single byte. So you could translate, for example, a 1 or a 0 as triggering certain things on the contract.
Okay.
So you need to be very specific about what kind of information the IoT network will pass on to the smart contract. In case it's a private blockchain, you don't have to worry about gas because you can set it up to be really cheap or 0, right? You just record that. And then the question becomes on how much you can trust your own private blockchain in terms of data provenance, right? The example you gave from Lang O'Rourke is a combination of supply chain automation along with provenance of data.
Exactly. So that is what we are thinking to implement here in Dubai. And one more last question, like in case of automatic payments, like we define during planning some rules of credit for invoicing or payments for contractor. Suppose he has done 30%, 30% payment should be released immediately to him instead of waiting and cross-checking. So can we make such conditions in smart contracts? Like if a person on site has certified that 30% work is complete, the next day the contractor should get the payment without wasting any time.
From what I understand, at least from research, this is certainly possible, right? A couple of researchers, some of them are here, actually have written about releasing or using essentially the blockchain more kind of like a either as a risk and value register where this is shared amongst the participants, and then a certain value is released according to a percentage of the work done or other events taking place. So it is possible. It just depends on what kind of setup you might actually need, right? So any kind of search online will get you at least 3 or 4 papers that describe various scenarios on that.
Yeah. So which tools are like we should use to interact the blockchain planning softwares like Primavera, MS Excel, or MS Asta Power Project?
From say Microsoft Project, for example.
Yeah. So there is a planning software, and if I want to dictate in a smart contract that on completion of my 30% of milestone, this action should happen by smart contract.
Mm-hmm.
So is there any API or any kind of intermediary software required for this?
I would use Python, and one of the exercises we will run after the discussion would be to essentially, and this is why I chose actually Python for the exercise, because it is generic enough to be run in various kinds of software, from BIM to project management to almost any computing platform, and you can customize your software according to what you need. You can also use a React API, which is a web API, but that would mean that you would need to be running web servers and similar kind of infrastructure. So these are not easy questions, right? It depends on what kind of scenario you have and what kind of infrastructure you have to answer this. The easiest one I have is to essentially do it through Python, because you can prototype it really easily without running a web server.
Okay. Okay.
Theo and Sagar, would it be worth also to check what sort of project management platform you are using and what they recommend? Because if you're using Project, that's quite different from if you're using something else.
Right now, it's a mega project, so we are using Primavera and mostly Oracle products.
Yes,
so,
to see what they offer, and if it's an Oracle and Oracle have their own solutions for blockchain.
I checked with Bentley there, because we are planning for digital twin also in future. But there is no kind of product that where Bentley is using blockchain to monitor digital twin or producing as-built models. So it could be a new adventure.
Yeah. So yeah, I agree with Theo. If you prototype your solution, Python, it's quite a good way to go about it.
So I mean, we need to build it from scratch.
I know, and I feel your pain, right? So this is where we were 2 years ago, right? So the prototype I'm going to show essentially is a custom plugin for Grasshopper that you can download. You can use our code; we don't mind. It's under the GPL, right? So at the moment, blockchain integration, as I mentioned in the discussion with Abel before, is at a very low level. So the high level concepts on smart contracts, yes, they work, but in terms of interfacing, this is where most of the pain actually takes place. So we're all trying to essentially build prototypes and kind of tinker with code so that we be able to build products that would interface in all of these scenarios.
Yeah, like the way I can see that like fintech industry is growing as compared to that, construction is like less accepting the blockchain technology, because a lot of fintech technology is on the board right now, and a lot of new developments are going on. So that's what I expect in construction also. Can we use such tools?
Of course, and I think this is why the consortium was put together,
yeah.
Right? And this is the whole purpose of all of this.
Thank you. Thank you, Theo.
Hi, Theo.
Hello.
Laurie here. Thank you for the presentation today. It was pretty good. I'm more interested into how blockchain could be deployed at the design phase. You know, in I don't know, when you model something in Revit or something like that. So I was just wondering if you envisage in the future a way that we can deploy a blockchain system with IPFS maybe, and I don't know, assign some property rights for certain models like families or things like that.
I'd like to answer by so keep the question, because the example I'm going to show potentially answers part of your question. So this is what we were trying to do 2 years ago with a framework for decentralized architectural design. So essentially trying to create potential for incorporating information on blockchain with design. And even though I'm active in construction as well, and fabrication, design is kind of like the first love, and this is where we're trying to do things. So I hope some of the examples we're going to show will answer your question.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Theo.
Hello.
I'm Julia. I just want to ask you, when you talk about connecting BIM models with the blockchain, should their format be open? I mean, if I use a private blockchain, can I still use BIM proprietary tools?
Yes. So you can use proprietary file formats to be able to. What happens is if you upload things on IPFS, that is a binary blob, so someone cannot read it unless you tell them what software to use. You don't have to use open source software to an open formats like IFC, as I did in the video. You can use a Revit file and continue working in the same kind of deal.
Okay, thank you.
I think there's a question by Soban. If participants agree, I think it will be valuable for the interested attendees to join a group forum cohort to share thoughts and independently following videos with the smart contracts. Yes, I mean, in terms of the ideas and asking for help, I'm very willing to answer questions as much as I can, right? So I don't know, we'll talk with Abel if we can set up a kind of forum or group where you can ask questions directly, other than just via email.
Hi, yeah, Theo. Yes, thanks. I think that'll be. Sorry, did you want to add something, Abel?
No, it's just commenting on Theo's point. Yeah, we will set up a kind of a blog, so we can keep a thread on Q&As and so on. But for the next one, not for this particular event today, but yeah, we will.
Yeah, I thought it would be quite valuable to have that sort of forum call to be able to discuss and ask simple, silly questions, which might be a quick one.
So that might be a blog in the website itself. We have functionality for that, or it might be a Discord channel or a Slack channel.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be quite useful. I just wanted to add, ask another question, which you might have already answered, but I didn't quite catch it. With the question I sometimes get when I discuss blockchain with colleagues is that if you record all the information on blockchain, then at some point it gets bloated and it gets too much, right? Where do you store that? Where all the PDF files, etc. I've read things about recording things off chain, on chain, etc. But then it goes to the question of if you capture that PDF of design or Revit model off chain, then how can you be sure of that it wasn't tampered with off the chain? Do you have any ideas? Do you have anything to discuss on that?
Yes. So one way. The beauty with the IPFS model I showed is that if you change the file, the hash will change, and through that you can essentially compare the two hashes. So let's say I send you a file and I sign it on the blockchain by putting the hash on the smart contract I showed, and I use that as proof that that model was created by me, right? And I'm the author of that model. So under certain legal frameworks, I would have responsibility for it according to, liabilities that are a little bit more complicated, right? If I'm an architect in the UK, I would have liability for that, and so on and so forth. I send you that model, you change it, and you present that model as the one that I presented. The moment you change it, the hash will change. And if you compare the two hashes that are stored on the blockchain, I immediately have evidence that the model was tampered with. Whereas my original model, every time I present it, will have the same hash. And obviously now the problem becomes, I presented you a very simple example. What happens in a very complicated project like an airport, for example, where you will have a series of hashes and a series of identities and addresses working on a very, very complicated project. Again, which is, I think, the point of what you're asking, right? We don't yet have tools to navigate that complexity. That would look mostly kind of like an enterprise blockchain setup where you have a system to manage all of that complexity. So there are no ready-made tools at the moment. Every time we are building something currently, we're kind of creating tools from scratch.
I see. So if that model on a site, if say that PDF file of design signatures, etc., which is now stored on a site, then that is linked to the blockchain, right?
Yes.
And if I change that file, if a site gets hacked or there is a malicious actor, and that file gets changed, then the hash has to change, right? Is that what you're saying? It can't happen without. Okay, I see. All right, thanks.
So to give you a practical example within the UK, right? We saw there was a Grenfell disaster and there was an inquiry in terms of who did what, right? And you saw, I don't know if you saw in the news that there were emails missing, there were data missing, right? Who made which decision? If you properly set up everything on the blockchain in terms of identities and recording of hash, you would not have that trouble. Or at least you will have evidence that data was tampered with. It might not guarantee that you will have data provenance, that you will always have access to the data, but it will guarantee that the data has changed.
It's changed. Okay, and it's not the right email. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm not a lawyer, right? Again, I'm trying to be very, very particular. Don't take any of this as legal advice, right? So then, lawyers would have to essentially decide beforehand who gets responsibility for what on a smart contract like that.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Ben has another question on how do you envisage to overcome the garbage in, garbage out challenge with IoT data entering a blockchain? Well, I think that's a question of architecture, right? Of the network and what essentially you attempt to record again on the blockchain, right? So once you figure out what you want to do, it becomes a matter of a design decision of how you design the network, essentially. Any other question?
I have one more question, Theo. Suppose I don't I feel like Solidity is quite difficult for me to start up with. So if I prepare a program in JavaScript, and if I want to convert it in a Solidity language, is there any converter available?
I wouldn't know the answer to that. I think not. I mean, Solidity is very closely related to JavaScript. So it's a matter of learning simple concepts. So far, I haven't seen any kind of translator like that. And initially, actually, I was looking for a translator that would go from Python to Solidity, but actually they don't exist, or they don't exist yet. One of the tools you might want to use. Do you do any kind of visual scripting, like with Dynamo or any other kind of node working system?
Like I'm using like Visual Basic 2009.
I didn't show this, but there is a new tool that is visual. Give me a second, I'm searching for it. So if.build is a very visual. It's also fully online. And essentially what it does, it uses a visual script idea to set up so this particular one, what it does now is it inputs a number. So lit, for example, let's go with 2020. This is a random generator. And this is a multiplier. This gets harshed, and then this gets translated into a string. It doesn't do anything meaningful at the moment, right? But essentially, you can use this to code your own smart contract.
I think it's similar to Dynamo structure.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Dynamo.
So for very fast prototypes, right? I would recommend that you can try and use this. And you can load from file or from a saving perspective, from a repository. I'm trying to remember now how you get, sorry, I have the Zoom interface on top. So you're able to copy and there's a function where you can save things and send them over, and I'll find it at some point. I cannot believe I forgot how. There is a function where you can actually export this into a smart contract to be used on Ethereum.
Okay, it's easy.
You can play it, so you can test it from that point of view. And if you see the available functions, right, you will discover that it's not that, in terms of features, Solidity doesn't have the complexity of what Python, for example, would have, right? I mean, with Python, you can do, so they're very simple concepts in terms of complexity.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Hi, Theo. Yeah, another question from me. Let's say you have a series of smart contracts that you've tested, and from testing them, you've proven that it works. What's the next stage to take that smart contract onto production? Like, what's the smart contract auditing? Or is there some sort of certification to say that your smart contract is ready for production?
If they pass the tests, according to at least the official documentation from Ethereum, the way I would do it is I would deploy them on a test network and then test on the test network. So you write the contracts, you test them with the test scripts to see that they are actually behaving like that. You deploy them on a test network and verify the transactions and the functionality. And after that stage, I would take them into production.
And is there an external auditing company or a third party that can verify that?
Well, the way you can do that is there are companies who can actually audit the smart contracts, or you can go with an open source approach if there are no confidentiality issues with the code, and allow others to review it. I'm probably not answering. Probably not giving the question the answers you would hope for, right? Take a look at the services that Consensus, the company behind Ethereum, gives, and potentially that might give you an idea of how you could set up a commercial or, let's say, trustworthy process on making sure the smart contracts are trustworthy.
And just out of curiosity, is there like an estimated cost roughly to how much it costs to audit the smart contract?
It depends on the complexity of the contract. So I wouldn't have an answer for that, right? Again, it depends on I mean, you would essentially hire programmers as consultants to do that. So it depends on the market, really. Are you interested in this for research purposes, or are you trying to find out what real costs would be? I mean, I'm just asking the question just to get to be able to give you much more information to help you.
Yeah, so I'm sponsored by Costain. So part of my research is divided up between UCL and Costain. And Costain are sort of playing around with the private blockchain and the public blockchain spectrum. And so they've got a few proof of concepts. One of their proof of concepts at the moment is using Hyperledger with HS2. So that's taking IoT sensors, feeding that into smart contracts, so similar as to what was discussed earlier. But we've figured out that, or we've discovered that there's a bunch of hurdles involved with that process at the moment. So I'm just wondering, because we haven't got to the stage yet where we want to, get smart contracts produced into the real world environment, but I can just see that question coming down the line, so, even if we come out with a successful proof of concept, what's the actual implied cost further down the line?
Yep.
When we...
Well, the most direct answer I can give you is I can connect you with smart contract developers that do prototypes, but also develop audit services. So you can ask them and see what kind of level of involvement that might mean.
Also, just a further question, sorry.
Sure, yeah, that's fine.
So what state are we in at the moment to interoperate blockchains with each other? So at the moment, I've worked a lot with Hyperledger, or not myself, but Costain have worked a lot with Hyperledger. But we're sort of looking at the public space, and we're just wondering whether we can take the contracts we have on Hyperledger, deploy them on Ethereum, or vice versa.
Yes, very, very interesting question. Certainly the space is fragmented as it was 2 years ago. There has been progress on interoperability. We are not yet at the level, I think, where you can just transparently write a smart contract for one platform and just deploy it to another. I'm guessing you're talking about Hyperledger Fabric, because Hyperledger also has many more solutions within it. I think the closest one that you can take a look at is the Hyperledger, not Barrow, the Hyperledger solution that was built by Consensus. Did you take a look at that?
I know the one you're talking about, actually, but I just can't remember the name of it.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the name as well now.
Is it that one? Besu?
The Besu, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So Hyperledger Besu, I think is one of the prime candidates for interoperability from our point of view of easing the use of contracts from one platform to the other. And we had the same problem as well. We started with Hyperledger Fabric. It was awful in terms of documentation. We switched to Ethereum. I'm now looking back at what Abel described, right? So going into Viper, but also looking at Hyperledger again. And certainly with a small team, because we're like 5 or 6 people essentially at the moment. Or even when I started, where I was working mostly alone, it's very difficult to keep track. So, but I don't really have an answer for that kind of question, of whether we would be able to get say in 2 years' time, interoperability and compatibility between them. What I think would be fantastic is if we have, say, ease of interfacing with a lot of those tools we want to use in the ecosystem with any of the blockchains, essentially. So that's what I would like to put effort on. Okay, let's take a break and let's get back in 10 minutes, and I'll take you through a couple of examples, and you'll be able to kind of interrupt and ask questions, and certainly I can show you the kind of decentralized framework for design.